Hello, my name's Keith and I'm the VIP Reading Illustrator of the month for October. And October, of course, is spooky month because it's Halloween. And recently I've been working on these brilliant spooky books, the Aveline Jones series by Phil Hicks. There's The Haunting of Aveline Jones and the new one, which is called The Bewitching of Aveline Jones. And if you like a spooky autumnal kind of read, these are absolutely brilliant. So in this video I thought I'd show you how to paint a spooky scarecrow and also some spooky crows, just like the ones that feature on the covers of the Aveline Jones books. This is the cover that I made for The Haunting of Aveline Jones by Phil Hicks. A brilliant spooky read, and these creepy scarecrows feature quite a lot in this book. So I thought we'd have a look at how to paint a spooky scarecrow a bit like the one on the cover here. So I've mixed up a couple of colours. This straw yellow colour, which is yellow ochre and a bit of white. It's supposed to be like sackcloth or something like that the scarecrow's shirt is made of. And I'm just very roughly painting it in. It sort of goes in at the waist there because there's going to be an old rope belt or something holding it together. I'm just going to sketch in a bit around the neck and some arms. And I'm just keeping it very rough and loose, deliberately, so it looks like a frayed old sack or something, especially at the ends of the arms here and the hem at the bottom of the shirt and around the neck. I want it to look quite rough, like it's a bit ripped and a bit frayed. That's okay. Now I'm just going to mix a slightly darker shade of that yellow by adding a little bit of ultramarine and a little bit of cadmium red. And that'll just take that yellow down and make it slightly darker. It's always better to use colours rather than adding black to make a darker shade. I'm just going to tweak that because it was a little bit too dark. I think that's okay. Always good to have a spare bit of paper to test your colours on as well before you go for it on the real thing. So I'm just adding in a few, again just very roughly, a few shadows around the ends of the sleeves and just to give a little bit of shape to the body, and around the neck there, which is also sort of open, and that just gives it a little bit more shape and form. It's time for the pumpkin head. So I've mixed up some orange here with some raw sienna and some alizarin crimson, and quite watery, and just draw in sort of oval shapes. This is going to be a pumpkin head. I mean, you could make the head anything you want. It could be a football or something like that. This is going to be a pumpkin, so it's orange and sort of oval shaped. And then again just a little slightly darker orange, add a bit of blue just to give a bit more shape and interest. I'm going to just use a hairdryer just to speed up the drying process, otherwise it is literally like watching paint dry. And that means I can go over the top of those paints now without it all running and becoming a mess. So I'm using a Chinagraph pencil and just sketching in a stick at the bottom that supports the scarecrow's body, and a sort of suggestion of messy grass or something. And then follow that line up and have it poking out the top of the shirt and sticking into the bottom of the pumpkin there, and then just some messy old twigs and sticks, and they're good. They look quite sort of spooky and claw-like sticking out of the sleeves. And then here comes that bit of old rope for the belt. And again, I'm not trying to be detailed or perfect, just going to have that suggestion that's maybe blowing in the wind a little bit, add a bit of atmosphere. And then a slightly darker orange pencil just to suggest the ridges of the pumpkin. Maybe a bit of darker brown shadow around the bottom. And the stalk of the pumpkin there. And then this is the fun bit. The best bit is putting in the spooky eyes. And if you do them at an angle and make them quite jaggedy, then they look a bit evil and a bit spooky. And a nice jaggedy, zigzaggy mouth. A few lines suggesting the sort of straw that the shirt's stuffed with. Pressing so hard I broke my pencil. The whole thing here is not to try and be neat, it's to try and just give it some kind of roughness and energy, and that all helps the feel that it's a spooky, scary thing. And then one of my favourite techniques is using an old toothbrush and a palette knife and just splattering some ink. And again, it just gives it a bit of texture and a bit of atmosphere. And if I just rub my pencil through that ink, I can get a bit more ground texture and shadow. And there it is, a spooky Aveline Jones Scarecrow. This is the cover that I illustrated for The Bewitching of Aveline Jones by Phil Hicks. And I really liked doing the spooky crows that feature on the cover and on some of the inside illustrations. And I enjoyed making them all sort of rough and raggedy to get across some of that malevolent energy that crows can sometimes have. So I'm going to start off with some coloured ink and just start to really roughly put in a sort of crow shape. And I'm not trying to be neat with these crows. I want them to be really scruffy and rough and just have lots of energy in them. And eventually I'm going to paint over this coloured ink with black, but having the coloured ink underneath just gives a nice suggestion of that sort of iridescence that crow's feathers can sometimes have. So I'm just sort of putting in the body and the tail and the wings flapping. And I really don't have to be too careful at this point. Just trying to sort of capture that shape and gesture of a crow that's about to come into land or something like that. Try and get that head and beak shape a bit better. And then let's do another one, I think. I'm just brushing out some of the ink off of the brush because it's going to be a little bit too wet otherwise. And I think this crow is going to be front on and also sort of hovering. Get those nice wings sticking up. And again, just keeping it really loose and scruffy, because that's the whole idea with these, really. It's just about playing with the paint. I actually did loads and loads of these for the cover, and ended up just picking the ones that came out best, because you never quite know what you're going to get. So I'm going to switch to black ink now and just start working over the top of those coloured shapes. Just going to start with a slightly finer brush and not too carefully, but just get the sharpness of the beak a little bit better. And I'm not trying to completely fill it in, I want some of that colour coming through. So again, I'm just being quite rough and just giving the brush a little bit of a flick to get the feathers in. It's nice the way the paint sort of dries out as you flick the brush and you get that sort of feathery texture. And that's good on the wings and on the tail. You have to be quite quick when you do it, but that all adds to the energy of the look of the final bird. Because crows can be quite sort of messy looking things, especially when they're flapping around in the wind. Let's get some nice spindly legs in and stick the claws in on the end. There he looks like he's about to land on a fence or on someone's head or something. I've left a bit of white here, which is going to sort of suggest the beak of this crow. Just slapping the ink around, really. Again, just flicking it to get that feathery effect. It's all about trying to capture the essence of a crow rather than, you know, an anatomically correct, perfect drawing. And there we go. 2 spooky crows.